The CEO cut the single dad's $600 job, then lost a $600 million contract. Why did the CEO cut the single dad's job? What happened after the company lost a $600 million contract? Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day filled with happiness and positive energy. Please give me about 5 seconds to share a small piece of kindness by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you never miss these meaningful stories. Thank you for being here and supporting this channel. Tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is right now. Now, let us begin the story. We hope this journey brings you inspiration and a positive moment today. Sometimes the smallest number on a company report hides the biggest mistake a leader will ever make. The meeting room was filled with confident voices as Claire Whitmore, the powerful CEO of Whitmore Industries, reviewed the latest expense report. Her eyes stopped on one small line that showed a monthly service cost of $600. "Cut it," she said calmly. "We need to focus on priorities." Nobody questioned the decision. To everyone in that room, it was just another expense, just another number. But standing quietly near the door was Ethan Walker, a single dad who had maintained that small responsibility for years. He did not argue. He did not ask for another chance. He simply nodded and said, "I understand." In a world where people often judge value by titles and salaries, Ethan had learned to let his actions speak louder than words. Every morning, he arrived early, checked the systems, helped solve problems, and made sure things worked smoothly behind the scenes. Most employees barely noticed him. To them, he was just the quiet worker handling a small job. They never asked why so many important details seemed to run perfectly when he was involved. Claire had built her career by making fast decisions. She believed efficiency meant removing anything that did not appear essential. Her company had grown because she trusted numbers, strategies, and expert opinions. But sometimes, the most important things in a business are not written clearly on a spreadsheet. Sometimes they are, carried by people who never. The morning after Ethan Walker's job was removed, life continued as if nothing important had changed. The office remained busy. Employees rushed between meetings, and executives focused on the upcoming $600 million contract. To most people inside Whitmore Industries, the decision to cut Ethan's small service was already forgotten. But Ethan noticed something different. He noticed the small changes that others ignored. A report that usually arrived on time was delayed. A process that had always moved smoothly started requiring extra attention. Nothing seemed serious yet, but Ethan understood something that many people did not. Large problems often begin with small signs. For years, Ethan had quietly watched how the company operated. He knew which systems depended on careful coordination. He knew which details mattered, even if they looked insignificant to others. But now that he was no longer responsible for that work, he stepped back. He respected the decision Claire had made, even if he disagreed with it. Ethan was not the kind of person who searched for an opportunity to say, "I told you so." He believed that helping people was more important than proving a point. Meanwhile, Claire Whitmore was preparing for the final stage of the major contract negotiation. Her leadership team believed they had everything they needed. The consultants had reviewed the information. The executives had approved the plan. The future looked promising. During one meeting, Claire looked at the projected numbers and smiled. "This contract will show what this company can accomplish," she said. Everyone in the room agreed. Nobody mentioned Ethan. Nobody mentioned the small task that had once seemed unimportant. Outside the office, Ethan focused on his new routine. He spent more time with Lily and looked for another opportunity to provide for his family. He never spoke negatively about Claire or the company. When Lily asked why he was no longer working on the same project, Ethan simply said, "Sometimes people make decisions based on what they know at the moment." Lily looked curious. "Do you think they made the wrong decision?" Ethan smiled. Gently, everyone makes choices with the information they have. The important thing is what we do next. Those words reflected the way Ethan lived his life. He understood that mistakes were part of being human. What mattered was how people responded when they discovered the truth. Several days passed, and the company moved closer to the contract deadline. Then, small concerns began reaching Claire's team. A client requested additional explanations. A process that had always been reliable needed adjustments. A few employees noticed that certain details were not being handled the way they used to be. Claire asked her executives for answers. They reviewed the information carefully, searching for the cause. At first, nobody could identify the issue. The numbers looked correct. The strategy looked strong. Everything appeared to be in place. But something was missing. Something that had been quietly supporting the company for years. And as the pressure grew, one question slowly began to emerge. What had changed since the day Ethan Walker was removed from the picture? The first signs of trouble were easy to ignore. In a company as large as Whitmore Industries, small delays happened every day. A document needed another review. A system required extra attention. A client asked a few more questions than usual. Most people saw these moments as normal business challenges. But Claire Whitmore had built her career by recognizing patterns, and she knew when something felt different. She called her leadership team into a meeting to review the situation. What changed? She asked. The room became quiet. Everyone reviewed the timeline, searching for the answer. They looked at the new strategies, the updated plans, and the recent adjustments. Everything appeared reasonable. Then one executive mentioned something simple. The only major change was the removal of the external support role from operations. Claire looked at the report again. The $600 position. The one she had considered too small to matter. At first, she dismissed the connection. It seemed impossible that such a small role could influence a contract worth $600 million. But curiosity led her to investigate further. She asked her team to review the history of Ethan Walker's work. What they discovered surprised them. Ethan had not just completed routine tasks. He had created a system of careful observations and relationships that helped prevent problems before they appeared. He understood the details because he had spent years paying attention. He knew which areas required patience. He knew which clients valued communication. He knew which small adjustments could prevent larger complications. None of this information was written in his job description. It existed because Ethan cared about doing his work well. Meanwhile, Ethan continued searching for new opportunities while spending time with Lily. He never expected the company to call him back. He had accepted the decision and moved forward. When a former coworker reached out and asked if he was surprised by the recent challenges, Ethan simply answered, "I hope they find the solution they need." His response showed the same character he had displayed from the beginning. He was not waiting for someone to admit they were wrong. He wanted the company and the people inside it to succeed. At Whitmore Industries, Claire continued reviewing the information. She learned that many of the company's strongest results had been connected to small actions Ethan had taken quietly over the years. He had noticed problems before they became expensive. He had helped employees understand complicated processes. He had maintained trust with important partners without ever asking for credit. Claire sat alone in her office that evening, looking at the numbers on her screen. For the first time, she realized she had measured Ethan's cost, but never measured his value. The mistake was not removing a $600 expense. The mistake was assuming that a small expense meant a small contribution. And as the deadline for the $600 million contract approached, Claire understood that the person she had overlooked might be the only person who could explain what was truly happening. Claire Whitmore spent the next morning reviewing every detail connected to the upcoming contract. The closer the deadline became, the clearer it was that the company was facing a challenge nobody had expected. The consultants who had helped create the strategy were searching for answers, but the missing piece remained hidden. Claire knew she needed to understand what Ethan Walker had seen that everyone else had missed. For the first time, she asked her team a question she should have asked earlier. Who understood this process better than anyone? The answer was immediate. Ethan, not because he had the highest position, not because he had the most impressive title, but because he had been paying attention for years. Claire reached out to Ethan and invited him to meet. When he arrived, he was not angry or disappointed. He simply walked into the room with the same calm attitude he had always carried. Claire looked at him for a moment before speaking. "I want to understand what happened," she said. "I also want to understand what we missed." Ethan appreciated the honesty. He opened the information in front of him and carefully reviewed the situation. He did not criticize the company. He did not mention that he had warned them. He simply looked at the facts. The problem is not the strategy itself, Ethan explained. The problem is that one important connection was overlooked. Claire listened carefully as Ethan described how different parts of the process depended on each other. He explained that the small service he provided was never just about completing a task. It was about observing changes, maintaining communication, and recognizing early signs before they became larger concerns. The $600 job had been a small part of the system, but it had a much larger purpose. Claire sat quietly as she realized the mistake. She had evaluated Ethan's work by its price instead of its impact. She had looked at the cost of keeping him instead of the cost of losing his knowledge. Ethan continued explaining possible solutions. His approach was practical and thoughtful. He did not promise that everything would be fixed instantly. He simply showed the company where to begin. The executives in the room listened differently this time. Months earlier, Ethan had been the person nobody expected to speak during important discussions. Now, everyone was focused on his words. After the meeting, Claire thanked him. "I owe you an apology," she said. Ethan looked surprised. "You made a business decision based on the information you had." Claire shook her head gently. "Maybe, but I failed to see the person behind the number." Those words stayed with both of them. Ethan did not need an apology to know his own worth. But hearing those words from Claire showed something important had changed. She was no longer seeing him as a small expense. She was seeing him as a person whose dedication had created value far beyond what anyone measured. As the contract deadline approached, Ethan agreed to help the company prepare, not because he wanted recognition, not because he wanted to prove anyone wrong. He helped because he believed in doing what was right. And for the first time, Claire understood that the quietest person in the room might sometimes carry the most important answer. The days leading up to the final contract review became a turning point for everyone at Whitmore Industries. For Claire Whitmore, it was no longer just about protecting a business opportunity. It was about understanding a lesson she had ignored for too long. She had always believed that successful companies were built through strong strategies, experienced consultants, and careful financial decisions. But now she was learning that success also depended on recognizing the people who quietly supported those strategies every day. Ethan Walker returned to the company with the same attitude he had always shown. He did not walk through the doors expecting special treatment. He did not remind anyone that his warning had been correct. He simply focused on finding the best solution. As the team reviewed the contract details, Ethan noticed patterns that others had missed. He carefully examined communication records, operational reports, and customer feedback. He connected small details that seemed unrelated but were actually part of the same problem. "The issue is not that the company lacks ability," Ethan explained during the meeting. "The issue is that the system lost someone who understood how all the pieces work together." The room became quiet. Everyone understood what he meant. The company had not lost a worker who completed a simple task. It had lost a person who carried years of knowledge and experience. Claire listened as Ethan explained the next steps. He suggested improvements that focused on long-term stability rather than quick solutions. He recommended better communication between departments and a more complete review process before making major decisions. His ideas were not complicated. They were practical. They came from someone who understood the company from the inside. The consultants who had once overlooked Ethan began asking him questions. They wanted to understand how he reached his conclusions. Ethan answered every question with patience and respect. He never acted as if he was smarter than anyone else. He simply shared what he had learned. One consultant finally admitted, "We were looking at the numbers, but you were looking at the entire system." Ethan smiled and replied, "Both are important. Numbers tell us what happened. Understanding helps us know why." Those words stayed with everyone in the room. Claire realized that Ethan's greatest strength was not just his knowledge. It was his ability to combine experience with humility. He could identify problems without blaming people. He could offer solutions without demanding recognition. Later that evening, Claire reviewed the history of Ethan's work. She discovered countless moments where he had helped the company succeed without anyone knowing. He had solved small issues before they became major concerns. He had supported employees who needed guidance. He had protected relationships with clients through simple acts of reliability. None of those contributions appeared on a financial report, but together, they represented something much greater than a $600 expense. They represented trust. As Claire prepared for the final contract meeting, she understood that the company was not only trying to save a valuable opportunity, it was also correcting a mistake in how it measured people. Ethan had never needed a bigger title to create a bigger impact. He had been proving his value quietly all along. And now, everyone was finally paying attention. The final contract meeting was approaching, and the atmosphere inside Whitmore Industries had completely changed. Just weeks earlier, Ethan Walker had been viewed as someone responsible for a small $600 task. Now, executives and consultants were gathering around the same table, waiting to hear his thoughts. But Ethan remained exactly the same person. He arrived prepared, listened carefully, and focused on the solution instead of the attention. Claire Whitmore noticed that difference more than anything else. Many people became different when they received recognition. Ethan became even more focused on helping others. During the preparation for the contract presentation, Ethan worked closely with the team to rebuild confidence with the client. He reviewed every detail, not searching for mistakes to blame on others, but looking for ways to create stability. He explained that trust was built through consistency. It was not created by one impressive presentation or one successful meeting. It was created through thousands of small actions done correctly over time. The team began seeing the situation differently. They realized that Ethan's contribution was never about one specific responsibility. His value came from understanding how every part of the company connected. He knew that a delayed response in one department could affect another. He understood that a small communication problem could become a larger concern if nobody paid attention. These were things that could not always be measured on a report. They had to be understood through experience. Before the final meeting, Claire spoke with Ethan privately. "I want you to know something," she said. "When I made that decision, I only saw a number. I did not see the person behind it." Ethan listened quietly. Claire continued, "You never made me feel wrong for that." "Why?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Because everyone can miss something. What matters is whether we are willing to see it when someone points it out." Claire appreciated his answer. It showed the quality that made Ethan different. He did not carry resentment. He carried understanding. The final presentation arrived, and the entire team entered the meeting with a renewed sense of confidence. Ethan was not introduced as the person who saved the company. He did not need that title. He simply participated as someone who understood the work and cared about the outcome. During the discussion, the client asked detailed questions about the company's approach. Ethan helped explain the answers clearly and calmly. His knowledge gave the client confidence because he spoke from real experience, not just prepared information. After the meeting ended, the room remained quiet for a moment. Then the client representatives expressed their appreciation for the team's honesty and preparation. The contract moved forward. Everyone in the room understood what had changed. It was not just the strategy. It was the mindset behind it. Later that evening, Claire returned to her office and looked at the original expense report where Ethan's small job had been listed. She thought about how easily people could overlook something because of its size. A small number had hidden a much larger truth. Ethan was never valuable because of the amount he was paid. He was valuable because of the care, knowledge, and dedication he brought every day. And finally, the company understood that the greatest contributions are not always the ones that appear the largest. Sometimes they are the ones quietly holding everything together. After the successful contract meeting, Whitmore Industries entered a new period of growth. But the most important change was not found in the new agreement. It was found in the way people inside the company began seeing one another. For years, many employees believed that influence came from a position, a title, or a place at the top of the organization. Ethan Walker quietly proved something different. He showed that dedication, experience, and responsibility could create an impact that no title could measure. Claire Whitmore carried that lesson with her every day. She began changing the way decisions were made throughout the company. Before approving major changes, leaders were encouraged to listen to the people closest to the work. Employees who had once remained silent started sharing their ideas. They felt respected because they knew their voices mattered. Ethan noticed the change, but he never considered himself the reason for it. He believed the company improved because people were finally working together with more trust and understanding. One afternoon, Claire invited Ethan to speak at a company leadership event. At first, he hesitated. Public attention was never something he wanted. He preferred solving problems quietly and returning home to spend time with Lily. But Claire explained that the lesson he represented was important for everyone to hear. When Ethan stood in front of the employees, he did not talk about being overlooked. He did not talk about the mistake the company had made. Instead, he talked about teamwork, responsibility, and the importance of recognizing value in unexpected places. Every person sees something from a different angle, Ethan said. A strong team is not built by finding people who think exactly the same. It is built by respecting different perspectives. The room listened carefully. Many employees remembered how easily Ethan could have been ignored because of the size of his role. They realized that they had almost made the same mistake. They had judged importance by appearance instead of contribution. After the event, several employees approached Ethan and thanked him. They shared stories about moments when they had ideas but were afraid to speak because they believed nobody would listen. Ethan encouraged them to keep sharing. He told them that every improvement begins with someone willing to ask a question or offer a new idea. Later that evening, Ethan returned home and found Lily waiting with a drawing she had made at school. She showed him a picture of him standing beside a group of people. "Everyone is listening to you," she said proudly. Ethan smiled and placed the drawing somewhere special. To Lily, her father was not important because of a company contract or a business achievement. He was important because he cared, he listened, and he always tried to do the right thing. Claire understood that lesson too. She had spent years searching for the people who could help the company grow. She finally realized that sometimes the greatest contributors are not the ones asking to be noticed. They're the ones quietly creating value every single day. Ethan Walker never needed to prove he mattered. His actions had already shown it. And the company that once measured his worth by a small expense finally learned that true value is never defined by a number. The success of the $600 million contract brought recognition to Whitmore Industries. But the greatest reward was the change that happened within the people who worked there. The company had discovered something far more valuable than a successful business opportunity. It had discovered a better way to understand people. Claire Whitmore spent many evenings reflecting on the decision she had made when she removed Ethan Walker's position. She realized that the mistake was not only about losing his work. The deeper mistake was believing that importance could be measured by cost. She had looked at a number and missed the person behind it. Ethan had never asked for a second chance. He had never demanded an apology. His actions had already shown the kind of person he was. One morning, Claire invited Ethan to her office. The conversation was different from their first meetings. There was no discussion about problems, contracts, or deadlines. It was simply a conversation between two people who had learned something from each other. "I want to thank you," Claire said, "not just for helping the company, but for showing us something we needed to understand." Ethan smiled. "I was only doing what I thought was right." Claire looked at him and realized that was exactly why people respected him. He never searched for attention. He never needed everyone to know what he could do. He focused on doing his work with care. Claire told Ethan that the company wanted to create a new approach where employees at every level could share ideas and solutions. She wanted people to feel that their contributions mattered. Ethan supported the idea, but he reminded her of something important. A company changes when people believe their voices are valued, he said, not just when new rules are created. Those words became a guiding principle for Whitmore Industries. Managers began spending more time listening to their teams. Employees became more comfortable sharing concerns and suggestions. The workplace slowly transformed into an environment where people felt respected. Ethan continued his daily routine. He worked hard, supported his co-workers, and always made time for Lily. His life outside the company remained simple, and that was exactly how he preferred it. One evening, Lily asked him why people at his workplace treated him differently now. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes people only see what is easy to measure. It takes time to understand what truly matters. Lily nodded, even though she was young, because she understood one thing clearly. Her father always treated people with kindness. He never believed he was better than anyone else. He simply believed everyone deserved respect. Claire carried that lesson into every decision she made as CEO. She became more careful about judging situations too quickly. She learned to ask more questions before reaching conclusions. She understood that leadership was not about always having the right answer. It was about being willing to discover the answer with others. Months later, a new employee joined the company and made a valuable suggestion during a meeting. Instead of ignoring the idea because of the person's position, the team listened carefully. Claire smiled when she saw it happen. She knew the company had changed, not because of a new strategy or a new contract, but because people finally understood the lesson Ethan had quietly taught them. The greatest value is often hidden in places nobody thinks to look. Years passed, but the lesson Ethan Walker brought to Whitmore Industries remained one of the most important moments in the company's history. The $600 decision that once seemed insignificant became a reminder that value is not always visible at first glance. It taught leaders, managers, and employees that every person can carry knowledge, experience, and dedication that cannot be measured by a simple number. Claire Whitmore continued leading the company with a different perspective. She still valued data, strategy, and expertise, but she also understood something she had once overlooked. Behind every role was a person. Behind every task was a purpose. And behind every quiet employee could be a contribution that changed everything. Ethan never changed because of the recognition he received. He continued arriving each day with the same patience and responsibility he had always shown. He continued helping others, solving problems, and supporting his family. The company respected him not because of one contract or one important moment, but because of the character he displayed every day. One afternoon, Claire visited Ethan's department and watched him helping a new employee understand a complicated process. She noticed the same patience and kindness that had defined him from the beginning. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply making sure someone else had the chance to succeed. Claire smiled because she finally understood the greatest lesson Ethan had taught her. True leadership was not about standing above people. It was about recognizing the strengths that already existed around you. Later that week, Claire spoke at a company event and shared a message with everyone. "We often measure what is easy to count," she said, "but the things that create the greatest impact are not always the things that appear on a report." The employees listened carefully because they knew the story behind those words. They had seen how one overlooked person could change an entire organization. After the event, Ethan returned home to Lily. She was older now, but she still asked him about his day the same way she always had. Ethan enjoyed those simple conversations because they reminded him what mattered most. Success was not only about professional achievements. It was about being present for the people who depended on you. It was about kindness, responsibility, and the choices made when nobody was watching. Claire eventually realized that the best decision she made was not signing a major contract. It was learning to see value where others did not. Ethan had never needed a larger title, a bigger office, or public recognition to prove his worth. His actions had already spoken for him. The world often notices the loudest voices first, but some of the most important people are the ones who quietly keep everything moving. They do not ask to be seen. They simply continue doing what is right. And sometimes, the smallest number on a page can hide the greatest lesson a company will ever learn.